Hello and welcome to the Leading People podcast. I'm Mita Sani and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Richard Monroe. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Mita. Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
So just to set the scene a little bit, we've created this podcast series because as entrepreneurs, as people leaders, and it can sometimes be quite a lonely place at the top, if you like, whether it's an SME or a really big organization. I just felt that it would be really good to get the insight of other business leaders, especially with experience and who can shed some light on their own journey and what lessons you've learned along the way to get where you are today.
Cool. Sounds great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we've got about 20 minutes, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Richard, I mean, God, your career is so impressive. Obviously, I do a bit of background and I've known you for years as well, because you are very much somebody who facilitates success, not only for the people in your own world, but your network as well. And you spent the time introducing me to potential people as well. So thank you for that, because I was definitely at the beginning of my sort of business leader journey then, and it gave me a lot of strength to see somebody else who's been there, done that, and how you add value. But tell me where it all started for you. Tell me how you knew that you were going to be the leader of your world rather than making somebody else's dreams come true.
Well, like all good ideas, it comes quite simply, really, in terms of how things start. I had a really amazing mentor. And having a great mentor is paramount to setting anything up. Mine was a guy called Philip Newton, and he was the property director of a company called Merchant Resale Group PLC. Okay. And he worked his way to the top. He was an independent entrepreneur anyway. He left school at 17 with no qualifications, and he worked really hard to make sure that he delivered some amazing things. He got into property development, and he had a car leasing company. And he had about 16 or 17 other businesses in addition to that. And he took me on when I was 21 as an oily rag, not knowing anything. And he said, Rich, just sit in the corner, keep your mouth shut, keep your ears open and listen. And then afterwards, I'm going to come and talk to you about what you've learnt. And he did that for the first 2 or 3 years of my career. And during that period, we came through a property boom in the late 80s, a property crash in the early 90s. And I went to go and work for the car leasing company for a few months because he knew he needed to keep me, but didn't know where to put me. Yeah. And then we found the most amazing product and amazing story, which was around the early 1990s. It was September 1990. And we were introduced to a chap called Martin Whitbread, who had a business called Ozone, which was spelled Eauzone, and he was basically selling perfume in a shop in Guildford. And in 6 weeks before Christmas, he sold over £120,000 worth of fine fragrance and aftershaves. It was just unbelievable. He then went on to open a few
as well. So big spend.
He then went on to open a few stores himself, but recognised that he didn't have the capability to run it himself. So Merchant Resale Group was looking for another angle into where they should go into. They historically ran department stores, and had a party super warehouse and a company called Norman's, which ran supermarkets in the southwest of England. Right. So that's what we were really heavily involved in until we found this company, and it was bought by the PLC. Yeah. And Philip was very strongly behind that, obviously. And then we discovered that Martin, sadly, was an undischarged bankrupt when we bought the company. So he had to be removed from the board straight away, because as a PLC, you can't have anyone with that sort of background. Yeah. And then we thought, well, what do we do now? We've got these 6 shops. We've got no management. We've got a warehouse full of perfume and lots of staff. Yeah. So we found another amazing guy who was running the party superstore business called Jeremy Siegel. And Jeremy and Philip and I effectively created the beginnings of what is now known as the perfume shop. And so we had to go through so we had to go through the rebranding, and we decided to open some bigger stores quite quickly that year. I went up to Meadowhall near Sheffield, where one of those stores were, and worked there for 2.5 months. And it was just an amazing experience, actually being in the store, absolutely in the front line, just to understand how it worked. we took half of our sales in a 6-week period before Christmas. And I remember working in Meadowhall having a queue of at least 100 people. This was in 1991.
Yeah.
Christmas 1991. 100 people lining up outside of the store in Meadowhall. And we were right opposite Boots and their main perfume department. And the manager of Boots just couldn't believe that we were there, and came over and started shouting off every single week about the fact that we were a discount fragrance and it was fake, and it was all sorts of things that he couldn't control. And it was brilliant because it got us loads of press, and we got the press involved, and we got on TV, and the queue went from 120 to about 700 people long within a couple of weeks. So it was just unbelievable. It was fabulous to understand how the business works from the front end. And so we grew the company.
You learned in that time, because so many business leaders, aren't necessarily exposed to that. What do you think that did for you?
Well, what it did was it made sure that every single year, all of the senior management team always went back to stores. So it was an absolute guarantee that every single one of us would be either in a warehouse or in a store or working for a 2-month period during November and December, all the way up to Christmas. It was actually from half term onwards, effectively, from late October, because that's when Christmas really started. So all the planning was all around stocks which was all the way through the summer, was all the way through for stocks for Christmas.
Yeah,
and it was a brilliant journey. So we added lots and lots of stores, but we were really, really careful about where they were located and what they looked like and how they were going to be performed, because the most important, we had the 3 P's in our life. It was product, as in fragrance. It was property, as in where they were located, where their shops were located, and the most important of all was the people. So those 3 P's, we had to get all 3 of them absolutely right, and we took hours discussing where they should be and where they should be located and who should be involved in it. I remember going over to Belfast when we first opened in Northern Ireland, and we always put an advert in the local paper, and we had about 1,000 responses, and we had to go and interview them. This was in 1992. We had to go and interview them in a hotel. So we had a local lady who was based in our Bournemouth store who wanted to go back to Belfast, and it was down to her that we went back there. Her name was Inga Skimmins. And Inga and I went into the Europa Hotel in Belfast, which was the most bombed hotel in the whole of Europe, because the troubles are still going on.
Yes.
And we had to go and interview hundreds and hundreds of people to come and work for it. We only needed 8 or 10, but we had to interview every single one, and we had to get a balance between Protestant and Catholic as well. So it was just an amazing experience to be able to grow. To be able to grow it, and we grew it to about 150 stores when I left.
That's amazing.
So it was a great journey.
And tell me about, what was the one lesson you would take away from there? Because you've already spoken about mentors, and I think that's something I've learned later in life as well, that we're not an island and that we don't know everything. And, from being in that supportive environment, but also from what it sounds like, being very much pushed to the front to say, like, this is the project, you're driving it. What did you learn from the perfume shop success? Well,
the biggest thing that we learned was the internet, because actually, we started in the early 1990s, and it wasn't even a computerized system. So everything was being marked on a piece of paper in a warehouse. So the first thing to do was to put it onto a decent computerized system, so that you knew where all your key selling units were. So that was crucial. So you knew how much stock you had and where it was. But the most important thing was using
IT to support.
Yeah, using IT, absolutely. Yeah. And then it was about really the internet. I always remember the first ever internet sale when it was in 1999, and someone came into my office and said, "We've had an internet sale." I said, "Great." And they said, "What have they bought?" And the guy said, "Well, they bought a bottle of Chanel 5." I said, "Fantastic. Have they paid?" And he said, "Yes, they paid online, with a credit card." I said, "Fantastic." He said, "What do I do now?" I said, "Put it in the post."
Yeah, I know.
So it went. So the best stores were always up in Scotland, and where there was high spendable income. But then all of a sudden, the internet came about, and we were a clicks and mortar business. So clicks being online and mortar being in real shops.
Yeah.
and the clicks went absolutely mad. So that nowadays, the perfumeshop.com is probably their biggest, seller in terms of being able to manage that, and it just comes straight out from one of their warehouses. So yes, a dramatic change in terms of learning about. It's something that we all take for granted now. You can order something on Amazon and it's there the next morning. So that was an amazing experience.
That's fantastic, and so early on in your career. I mean, how do you top that? What made you take the next step after that?
Well, we sold the business, so it was sold to Hutchinson Whampoa, that own Superdrug and mobile phone brand 3.
Orange, I remember Orange.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really, he was the richest man in Asia, and probably still is. And we knew for a fact that we either had to fight against. He was buying a lot of big businesses out with supply from the same suppliers as us, and you either had to fight them or join them effectively. And the share price when we first started was about 13 or 14 pence. The break even was about 66 pence, and we actually sold it for £1.98. So for nearly, you can nearly get £2 a share. Was a highlight in terms of how we approached it. And it's gone on from strength to strength since then. It's grown even more, and it's got really strong. And lots of those existing managers that we took on became, directors of the business and drove it forwards even more. So it's created a huge amount of employment. Yeah, it's created a huge growth path for people in their careers. It was very well organised in terms of how that works, which we set up right from the very beginning. And the principles of how it was done have always stayed the same. So they always have an expression called sharing the love, which was actually what it was all about. And if you shared the love with everybody within the business, then that's what really drove it. So when we sold it, that was a sort of
that way, doesn't it? If you share the love.
It was a turning point, though. It was a turning point in my career. So, I knew I wanted to keep involved with property. I'd been travelling all over the country and Europe, the world, to go and find all sorts of wonderful fragrances to put into the stores. So I thought, actually, I haven't really discovered London. So I wanted to discover London and all the things that are good about it. So I decided to get a job in London, working for a fitting out company for offices, because I wanted to stay in the property sphere and have those connections into it. But I also wanted to learn more about London. So I always remember my first morning, someone said, "Can you meet me at bar 42 opposite Tower 42?" And that was all I was told. And I didn't know what bar 42 was. I didn't know what Tower 42 was. But, obviously, you learn about these things and where people are. And now it's second name. Yeah,
when you become a Londoner, those landmarks and names, you take them for granted, don't you? So
it was bizarre at the time then.
Yeah, well, I think London is the greatest city in the world, and having not been there, obviously we're recording this in the pandemic, for 4 months, it feels like I've, lost some of my, lost my left arm. I think just working in the centre of, the universe in terms of businesses and the financial centre of the world, as I like to think of it. In itself, that gives you an energy and a drive, doesn't it?
It certainly does, yeah. And it's amazing how small a place it can be and how well connected it can be. With the use of LinkedIn and all sorts of other online presences, your network that you've had for a long, long time all of a sudden becomes that much shallower. And I think they often say you're sort of 6 or 7 steps to royalty. Well, when you're in London, you're probably only 2 or 3 people away from someone you really need to talk to. And that's the other thing I really learned from Philip was finding the wise person in the room. He always had an expression: find the person who knows the answer of the question that you want to ask as fast as possible, and you will get the answer quickly. So it's a really good expression to take forwards, because for what we do in office in the design and build world is that we need to talk to a business owner or a finance director or someone senior within the C-suite executive level, because they have a problem. They have a problem. Either their lease is running out, the building's being knocked down, they've just been taken over, they're about to take somebody else over. All sorts of defining things that will make them and there are things that keep them awake at night. So that's a really interesting conversation I have with chief execs when I go to meet them, is to understand what keeps them awake at night. And often it's, I can't find the right staff, or I need to move my business on, and I can't do it located where I am, and I need to do something about it. And, you often find that they're in a building that hadn't done anything to for 15 or 20 years, and no wonder no one doesn't want to go and work there. So.
And that's really interesting what you just said about what keeps you up at night, because again, I think when people look at business leaders or when they're talking to a CEO, and sometimes people can feel, and myself, I obviously deal in the helping organizations find those people to keep their world going and thriving. And sometimes you do feel a little bit like, okay, these are really successful people of really great organizations, but when you bring it to the basic level of what keeps you up at night, we realize that this is just another human being with a big set of challenges that needs solutions. And being able to relate on a professional but familiar way, I think, is a real skill, which isn't always inherent in business leaders.
I think it's something that you either have or you haven't. You can learn it. You can certainly learn it, but to be able to empathise and to understand what somebody else is going through normally comes because you've done it yourself or you've had that experience yourself. And actually being able to share it is a fantastic thing to do. Yeah,
very much so. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of connectivity, but I'm going to continue talking because I really want to hear. I'd love to hear, Richard, how you've struck the balance between the great career, the traveling the world, going all around, getting to know London. What about family? What about the work-life balance? Tell me about that.
So what my belief in terms of what I do is always around choose a career that you love, because if you love your career and you love your family, you can intertwine the two. And actually, for the past 3 or 4 months, it's I've been, as you can see, I've been working from my dining room from the background that I've got here. But it's you're able to intertwine the two, and family is number one. And actually, if you treat the business as you're part of the family, as another family member, then all of a sudden things become a lot easier, because when you need to do something, there's some understanding from all spheres. But my wife's got a fantastic career, and she works for a headhunter, and she's having to work a long hours into it. She works with America at the moment as well.
Yeah.
And so they're combining the two. We've only got one child, and he's now 19, so it's really easy now. But at the beginning, it was tough. Yeah, it was tough, especially when to look after him, and who was it going to be, and whose day was more important, and all of those sort of underlying queries that went through your head in terms of being able to manage life. But it gets easier, I think, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody that is thinking about taking that step from potentially working for somebody to stepping out and trying to create something for themselves? What would your advice to them be?
My advice would be make sure that whatever you're going to do has a market. Make sure that you have enough cash to get through the first 6 to 9 months, because you might not get any income for that length of time.
Yeah.
Choose something that you love and that you know back to front in terms of how you're going to in terms of how you approach that particular piece of work that you want to do, and how you want to live your life. But to get control of it, it's a great feeling to be able to have that control as to how you then be able to live. You're going to work hard, and you're going to learn things that you wouldn't actually believe were within your remit. But you have to do it because you're there doing it on your own.
Yeah, very much. I think whether we work for somebody or we choose to lead our own world, we're going to have a set of challenges, but it's the set of challenges you choose to put yourself in front of and overcome, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing would be to make sure you choose something that you know has a market. Yeah. Because if you don't do some proper testing before you start the journey, then there's no point in going on the journey.
No, very much so. That's really wise words. So tell me about, as project director at Workplace Creations, just as we're winding up, tell me about what Richard Munro is doing now and what the near future looks like for you.
Well, it's survival time for us at the moment. We had a fantastic, the business has been going for 17 years. I joined it a couple of years ago to help it grow to the next phase. And the next phase for them was to grow an 8, 9, 10 million pound business up to a 20 million pound business. That was the plan. Yeah. And then obviously for the last 2 or 3, 4 months of COVID-19, we've had to relook at everything really in terms of how we approach things. And last year we turned over £12 million. This year we'll be lucky to break even, and break even for us is between 5.5 and 5.8 million. So we're some way there. We've got a 1.5 million to go. We've got half a year to do it. So we're just relying on lots of relationships that we've had. The beauty about the business is that it has an 80% retention rate on clients, which is unheard of in terms of what we do. So we are very much reliant on those existing clients that we have. And we have some great opportunities that we're still working on for lots of different organisations that have thought about how they're going to come back to the working environment. We've got a couple from a educational perspective that need to do something because they have to be in the UK for next year.
Yeah.
So those are really interesting conversations that are being had, and some relationships that have been going on for sort of 12 or 13 months now, but haven't declined at all because we've all been able to use Teams and Zoom. So it's been great being able to link back into those people that we are currently working with. And one of them is also we're on site in Baltimore over in the US for existing clients. We've done some work for them in Israel, in the Iberian Peninsula, a lot in London. They're based in the Shard. They're called Jellyfish, and we've done a job just recently about to complete in Warrington for them, but we're on site also in Baltimore in the States, running it from a project management and a design perspective, which can all be done remotely. So we haven't actually lost any of that touch because we're able to talk to our clients just like you and I are now. So it's been
harnessing technology again, just as you did at the perfume shop in 1999 with your first online sale. So it's the tools.
That's right.
But we have the tools, but without the mindset and the attitude to rise above challenges or stay calm within challenges, they're not much use. So as a closing comment, time is limited. As a closing comment, how would you say, we dealing with adversity? What would you give advice on dealing with adversity?
Be patient is my best piece of advice. You can often have a knee-jerk reaction to a situation that you think is in front of you. I think it's always important to be able to step back. I always relate it back to a forest. If you're in the middle of a forest with the problems all around you and you're very close to the trees, all you can see is the trees. What you need to do is you need to get above the forest and look down, and all of a sudden, if you go high enough, you'll be able to see the path through the forest rather than just the trees and the wood in front of you. And I know it's a cliche expression, but in this particular time, being able to look to go on the right route will mean that you don't have a knee-jerk reaction of making lots of people redundant, having to change the way the culture of the business and the investment that has been made in it because you're just having a knee-jerk reaction. So patience, I think, is the most important thing. However, when you know where you're going to go, you've got to go on it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So when you do make that decision to do something,
the right decision made.
Exactly.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, Richard, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your journey and your lessons learned on the way.
Thank you, Mita. Lovely to see you again.
And you too. All the best. Thank you so much.
Take care now.
Take care, Richard.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye.